So Mammals is the latest series by BBC Earth, and as you'd gather from the title, this focuses on mammals. So it's the first series since The Life of Mammals, which came out in 2002, to focus on mammals specifically. This series isn't a direct sequel to that series, it's a very different kind of programme, it's more spectacle driven, like Planet Earth or Planet Earth 2, that kind of programme. But there's definitely things that harken back to that series, and I'll touch upon that. So this episode opens up with David Attenborough in a theatre watching a video of the moment the asteroid hit the Earth, which wiped out the dinosaurs. So this kind of harkens back to Life of Mammals in a weird way. I don't know how intentional it was, but instead of diary sequences, that series had David Attenborough in a theatre watching something about the making of the series. So I don't know if it was intentional that this kind of looks just like that or not, but it kind of worked for me. So from there we look at chimps. So the sequence with the chimps basically focuses on a troop of chimps going to bed basically. Chimps aren't animals that are able to see well in the dark, much like ourselves, and they are in a minority of that. We basically see the chimps making a bed. I think this is something that we know they do, but I don't think we've seen it very often. So I think it was quite cool to see it here. So from there we see leopards. So leopards are an animal that can see very well in the dark, unlike chimps and us, and we see them hunting. So this footage is shot using thermal imaging, and that's a technique that I think that works really well sometimes. It worked really well in Planet Earth 2 with the leopards in Mumbai, and I think it works really well here. It feels very eerie, it feels very ghostly. I think the leopards seem more menacing in the infrared, because leopards don't actually look that menacing, I find, in the daylight. They're not as big as lions or tigers or even jaguars, so they don't come across as intimidating, but they are very efficient predators in their own right. And we see them hunting baboons here, and it's a really good sequence. Baboons also not an animal that's easy to catch. And I think they did a really good job of just showing you the leopards just scaling the trees. Obviously, they're having to use stealth to get there, but once they wake the baboons up, there's no stealth. Stealth goes out the window, and they just basically are diving into this troop to try and catch them. And it's a great, great sequence. There's this one point where there's a baboon mother and her baby that are basically cornered by the leopard, and they would be the easiest prey, I think, for the leopard to catch. I did think, are we really going to see a baboon mother and her baby getting killed by a leopard? Probably not. I didn't actually expect the sequence to end with a kill, but we did actually get one. It did manage to catch another baboon, and it is quite, again, gruesome. The fact that it's in thermal imaging, we see blood basically just dripping down the tree. Like, it is quite gruesome, but obviously because it's in thermal imaging, we don't see the full horrors of it. But I think that was a really good sequence. And from there we see fennec foxes. Fennec foxes aren't an animal we see very often. The only other time I think we've seen them is in The Life of Mammals, again, 2002, so been quite a while. And we just see them roaming around the desert. It's just nice to see them, even if they're not doing anything hugely miraculous. It's just cool to see them do stuff. So yeah, I really like that part of the episode. After that, we start to explore what the first mammals might be like. So the first mammals, realistically, were small nocturnal animals in the shadow of the dinosaurs. So we see what those first mammals might look like in the form of shrews. So shrews were the example that we used in The Life of Mammals as well to highlight that. So again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the shrews were really cool. We see them doing the exact same thing we saw in Life of Mammals. The young will cling to their mother and follow them in a trail. And it's quite a good sequence. And we see the shrews actually hunting. So shrews in their right are pretty good hunters. We see them catching grasshoppers, which are about the same size as them. It's quite a big meal for a shrew. It's basically like a lion taking a buffalo. So, quite impressive. And we talk about how shrews have such a high, shrews have a very fast-paced life. The shrews' metabolism is so fast that they need to really constantly be eating. It's illegal to trap shrews and without checking the traps with some regularity, because they will ultimately die. We don't see shrews very often, and it's nice to see them do stuff. We also see armadillos. So the armadillo sequence is probably the funniest of the episode. It's basically this male armadillo. He's out, snuffling around looking for food, and he finds a female, and he's just trying to get this female to mate with him. And it's pretty funny. He's just following her. It's quite funny every time he tries to jump on her back and he just falls off. And it ends with the male getting the female. After that, we focus on hyenas. So the hyena sequence is probably the highlight of the episode for me. The leopard sequence is pretty high as well, but I think the hyenas might have a bit of the edge for me. So we see hyenas, for one, portrayed in a positive light. Pretty rare in these episodes. Usually in these programs, hyenas are almost always the baddies. We spend quite a lot of time with this clan of hyenas, talking about how the females have to work together, how they raise offspring, and how they're this proper family unit. And it's pretty good. And then we see them out there in the Ngorongoro crater looking for food. We see them kind of tussling with lions. It's weird because it's kind of the hyenas are the protagonists of the sequence. Almost always when hyenas are taking a kill from another predator, they're the baddies. So it was weird to see them portrayed kind of the good guys here. But they don't get the kill. Instead, they go looking for buffalo. I knew that hyenas were pretty efficient predators. I didn't know they would take on a buffalo. I didn't know they're not as big as, a lion already is a bit of a disadvantage when taking on a buffalo, and we see them really struggle with it. Hyenas, much smaller than a lion. I didn't see how it was possible. Even when it's next to the buffalo, the individual hyenas look tiny. They look almost slightly larger than the buffalo's head. Like, it really doesn't look like a fair fight at all. But then they start calling the troops. And from this point, it's really interesting. I mean, that eerie call that hyenas make just to summon in the other hyenas is chilling. It's really chilling. And when they ultimately, all these hyenas come in, like 60 hyenas come in just to take on this buffalo, you really see the tables turning. Like, and then when the buffalo's obviously brought into the water, they managed to bring it down. It's just a really good sequence. It's so unexpected. Because I didn't know this happened, I had no anticipation for it. The leopard hunting the baboons, like, I knew that happened. I knew leopards hunted baboons, and seeing that was cool enough, but this was just another level. Again, this used thermal imaging to great effect. It was just a really, really good sequence. After that, we look at Damaraland mole rats. They live in a colony, they haven't dig for roots and tubers, but when the soil dries up in the dry season, they can't get to them, and they have to just basically hibernate till the rains come. That was a good sequence. After that, we start looking at the true masters of the night with regards to mammals, and that is the bats. So we look at bulldog bats. We spent quite a lot of time with them. And they're quite good. I think what was really good about this sequence was actually explaining echolocation. It did a very good job of showing you, like, I think Life of Mammals did a really good job of showing you echolocation, but the technology's come a long way since then, and I think we can really see it. It gets a really good job of showing you the picture that the bats get when they echolocate of their surroundings. And I think it did a really good job of showing you the actual close-ups of the bats while they're echolocating. I don't think I've ever seen that before. We see them catching fish. Again, I knew that they caught fish. But seeing it was really cool. It was all slow-mo. It was really good sequence. I think the bit of them echolocating was actually more impressive than them catching fish, but it was still a really good sequence. After that, we see the Mexican free-tailed bats. That's the biggest spectacle of bats in the world. It's a massive gathering of mammals. It's the biggest gathering of mammals anywhere in the world, and it is pretty impressive to look at. After that, we look at coyotes. So coyotes are an animal that have had to adapt to humans. This episode doesn't really have an environmental message, which I kind of like. It feels kind of refreshing. I feel like some series, some episodes lend themselves to having an environmental message. This one, I don't think it really did. If they were going to talk about light pollution, they could have done it, but you had to find some good examples for it. I think the fact that they just show you the coyotes just adapting to human surroundings, they've started to become nocturnal. They would normally be animals that would come out in the day, and they go out hunting rabbits and geese and everything in the parks in Chicago. That was really cool. Then obviously we get the diary sequence, and it's about the people filming the fennec foxes, which I heard was a really difficult shoot. So I kind of gathered that was going to be the sequence we saw. And we see the dead fennec foxes as well. It touches upon the persecution they have. I didn't really know they were persecuted. I knew there was a bit of an issue with the pet trade, but I didn't know that people just, killed them for fun. If anything, I'd have thought maybe it would have been some local superstition, but no. There seems to be a few reasons they're getting attacked, which is pretty rough. But when they finally get them, it's quite nice. So yeah, I like that. Overall, this episode was really good. I really like this episode. I think the series as a whole, it kind of feels like it's going to be really good. I think the highlights for me were the hyenas and the buffalo. The leopards were also really good. I liked pretty much everything. The bats, the armadillos, the mole rats. It pretty much was all really good. There wasn't a weak point. So yeah, what did you think of this episode? Did you like it? What were your highlights? And also, as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. As ever, you don't feel like you need to, but it's always appreciated. So yeah, I'll be doing the next episode, which is the New World. It looks like. I think that's what it's called. Look forward to that, and I'll see you next time. And goodbye.